Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere you may think you've seen before. Muddy fields, crumbling cottages, and soot-streaked peasants muttering in Old English. But trust me, you haven't really lived it. Tonight, you will. You wake up not in your own bed, but in a scratchy pile of straw, your bones sore from sleep, your nose filled with smoke and pig stink. Your name doesn't matter. Nobody will remember it in the records anyway. Statistically, you're unlikely to survive past your mid-30s. And if that's not grim enough, dysentery, famine, or a stray hoof to the skull could end you even sooner. Before you settle in, take a moment to like this story if you enjoy it, and let me know where you're reading from and what time it is. I love knowing who's diving into this journey with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's step into this world together. You wake to the sound of chickens clucking loudly. You didn't mean to fall asleep so late. The fire died hours ago, and the damp floor's chill seeps into your bones. You shift on the straw-stuffed mattress. Less a mattress, more a burlap sack filled with hay and last summer's fleas. Your breath curls in the cold, smoky air. The rafters above are coated in a decade's worth of soot, and a spider the size of your thumb descends casually toward your head. Time to get up. This cottage isn't truly yours. You're a tenant on your lord's land, allowed to live here as long as you work, pay, and don't die too publicly. Your one-room home houses your entire family, your chickens, and sometimes your neighbor's goat, who keeps slipping through the wattle fence. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof where the smoke half-heartedly tries to escape. The air is thick with last night's fire, compost, damp wool, and livestock. You breathe it like it's normal because it is. Your wife is already up, stoking the fire with a stick, coughing through the effort. Your youngest clings to her side, asleep, drooling into the woolen blanket you used to patch the roof last summer. Your oldest fumbles with his belt, fingers numb from the cold. You'd scold him, but your hands aren't much better. You pull on your tunic, frozen into the vague shape of your body, and wrestle it on. Today is Thursday. Field work, as always. Unless it's a feast day, a holy day, where the Lord needs you to dig a ditch, fix a fence, or chase off wayward pigs. Before you leave, there's work to do here. You step outside into the wet morning light, your feet sinking into cold mud. Always mud, doing a little dance to avoid something suspiciously warm. The air smells of wet thatch and pig droppings. You check the cart, your turn to use it today, and wheel it toward the path leading to your strip of land. You pass your neighbor, Alric, already arguing with his wife about whether their cow is bewitched again. You nod, they nod back. That's as friendly as it gets this early. The tools aren't yours. They belong to the village or the manor, borrowed because you're trustworthy enough not to pawn them for ale. The wooden plow creaks as you haul it forward. It's seen better centuries. Here's a historical tidbit. Peasants in medieval England didn't farm freely. You work in long, thin strips, part of a vast open field system managed by custom and generations of compromise. Your plots are scattered, surrounded by other strips, so mistakes, like trampling someone's barley, spark drama, and not the fun kind. You reach your plot. The sun breaks through the mist, golden and oddly optimistic. Birds mock you with their chatter. You stick the plow into the damp earth, grunt, and start dragging. This is your life. Every inch of soil could feed your family or rot in the next rainstorm. You work with one eye on the sky, the other on your oxen's moods. Temperamental beasts with no respect for your authority. You're sweating by the first furrow, your back already feeling like a snapped bowstring. Here's a quirky fact. Your village believes singing to the soil helps it grow, not because of science, but because of elves. You don't fully buy it, but you've caught yourself humming when thoughts drift to the terrifying reality of no savings, no safety net, and no plan if the harvest fails. Your knees hurt, too. Some scholars argue peasants had more leisure time than modern workers. It sounds absurd as you dig your fifth trench, but there's logic. Feast days meant no work, just festivals and pageants. Still, those days came with religious duties, tithes, or extra chores to catch up. Whether it felt like leisure is debatable. You're just trying to avoid hitting another rock with your plow, glancing at the clouds, reading sky signs and bird behavior like your father did, guessing the weather. Too much rain. and your field's a mud pit, too little, and the crops die thirsty. You pause, stretch your aching back, and wipe your forehead with a sleeve smelling of smoked bacon and wet wool. The sun's higher now, time's slipping away. You got 100 more yards to plow before midday. No one's watching, no one's clapping. You just keep moving. Step, drag, push, turn. You wonder if this year will bring change, but you already know the answer. Your stomach growls, loud and insistent. Time for breakfast, if you can call it that. The skies turn to dull, familiar gray, like overwashed linen. You shake off the dirt, stretch until something pops, and trudge back to the cottage. The mud sucks at your boots, and the wind reminds you your tunic is more holes than fabric. Inside, the fire's going, thanks to your wife, probably burning dried cow dung since wood's scarce. Blame the Lord who prioritizes his hunting forest. The smell hits you, warm, wet, vaguely edible. Gruel again. You sit by the hearth on a bench polished by generations of oil and smoke. Your wife hands you a bowl without a word, communication reduced to eyebrow raises and sighs. The gruel, barley, stray turnip scraps, and hopefully boiled creek water jiggles ominously. You blow on it, pretending it's civilized. Your middle child eats with hunger-fueled enthusiasm, chin crusted with yesterday's porridge. You want to mention manners, but settle for him eating it all. Your wife joins you, her look saying, "We're not out of the woods, but we're not dead." You take a bite. It's warm. That's something. Your drink is weak ale, safer than water, cheaper than milk. Everyone drinks it. You, the kids, even the priest. It's low in alcohol, high in calories, a necessity in medieval England. Women, often called alewives, brewed it, one of the few ways a peasant woman could earn income without stepping too far out of line. Your wife's batches sometimes nourish, sometimes make you see things. They're the village rumor that too much ergot-infected rye in the ale causes, which dreams. Old Rad once saw demons climbing his thatch after drinking Milda's brew. You've never seen demons, but you did wake up outside the sheep pen once, no clue how. You finish with a crust of coarse bread, baked yesterday or the day before. No butter, no jam, unless you count the fermented plum disaster from the last village gathering. You chew slowly, the rough texture grinding between your teeth. Your oldest asks to check the traps for rabbits later. You nod but warn him to avoid the cursed stream bank, not because you believe in curses, but because you believe in the reeves cudgel. Some historians argue this breakfast, grain mush, bread, maybe a boiled root, was healthier than modern diets. No processed sugar, no preservatives, just whole grains and starvation. It builds strong bones, they say, if you live long enough. You pass your bowl to your wife, who scrapes the leftovers for the pigs. The cottage is barely warmer than outside, the roof leaking again. You make a mental note to patch it with reeds. Someday. Your kids start their chores without prompting. The youngest collects eggs, half cracked or foul, while the older two tend the animals. There's a thin pride in their quiet efficiency. Not nobility, just survival. No eggs, no milk, no meat, no second chances. You step outside, breathing manure-laced air with a hint of mold, a peasant's perfume. The church bell chimes once, marking time. You're already behind. Back to the fields. The sky's still gray, the damp seeping into your bones. You trudge with the plow, shoulders sore, feet soaked. The oxen lumber ahead, eyes half-lidded, as miserable as you. This strip of land isn't yours. Just a few furlongs in the open field system, scattered among others' barley and oats. You could never afford a tidy farm. Not unless you married a widow with land and no sons. Unlikely. The soil's a soft paste from last night's rain. Not enough to stop work, but enough to make it miserable. The plow hesitates. You push, grit your teeth, and start. Step, haul, breathe, curse, repeat. Farming isn't the romantic sunrise over golden wheat. It's punishment. The soil's clumpy, full of rocks, roots, and mystery bones you ignore. Your hands are raw, calluses on calluses, the plow catching on invisible obstacles. Village sounds drift faintly. Someone shouting about runaway pigs, a dog barking, a heavy thud. Mostly, it's you, the plow, and the squish of boots and muck. A bird lands, judges your form, and flies off unimpressed. During planting season, your day starts before dawn and stretches past twilight. No clocking out. Your energy is your currency, and the weather could undo it all by morning. The oxen pause, uncooperative, one belching, the other chewing and ignoring you. You jab the plow's staff, mutter threats, consider begging. Nothing works. Then the bailiff rides by, not your lord but acting like it, appointed to oversee the manor's land and ensure you're not slacking. He trots past on a scrawny pony, cloak flapping, nose curled like he smells something awful. He does, it's the village. He squints at your work, calculating. You nod politely. He doesn't. Keep moving, he says. Quota before Pentecost. You mutter agreement and resume. He lingers, watching, then rides on. The oxen, sensing the tension, start moving. Traitors. A quirky fact. You believe the bailiff's pony is possessed. It's thrown every rider but him, kicked a friar into a dung heap, and bit the blacksmith. Some whisper it's a cursed beast, maybe a reincarnated tax collector. You steer clear on feast days. Your shoulders burn, knees ache, backs one sneeze from collapse. You switch hands on the plow, but it's no better. Every inch tilled is a chance to feed your family through winter. You pause, looking at the scraggly trees on the horizon. The wind whispers through the barley. Birds trill, a fleeting moment of peace. Some scholars say peasants were miserable, broken by toil. Others argue there was meaning in the season's rhythm, in knowing the land. You hate the work, but you know it when a plant which weeds heal. There's dignity in that, even if your back disagrees. You finish the row, panting, letting the oxen graze. A breeze carries fresh-cut hay and the sharp scent of Nan's eye-watering stew. You sip from your water skin, hoping the creek's clean today. The church bell tolls 3 times, midday. Time moves, even if your feet don't. You whistle to the oxen, who blink, unimpressed, but shuffle into place. The second half of the field awaits. Step, haul, curse, repeat. The sun, pale as a sickly onion, makes you squint. Your back's numb, your stomach grumbling. You wipe your face with a sleeve that's more dirt than fabric. Behind you, a thud and cursing. Alric, wrestling his plow, probably hit a rock or cursed relic. You wave in sympathy. He spits and waves back. Solidarity in suffering. You can't break for lunch yet. The oxen are dragging their hooves, but you're not arguing with beasts twice your weight. You pull them to a shady stone wall and sit on a dryish rock, pulling out your ration. Bread, questionable cheese, and a shriveled apple. You chew slowly, hearing kids yelling, a dog barking, the blacksmith clang. Gossip floats like smoke. Ethel's daughter might be pregnant, maybe by a monk with a fancy cloak. Depends who you ask. It's your only entertainment. No theater, no books, just village sagas over sheep or sneaky trysts. Alric wanders over, pink-faced and dirt-covered, groaning about cursed soil. You offer cheese. He declines, pulling out his own snack. Hear about the reeves pig? He asks. You raise an eyebrow. Dead, he says. Swelled up like a wineskin. Screamed all night. They say witchcraft. The village blames curses or witches when logic fails. Never mind the pigs die of spoiled mash. They point at old Nan, who survived plagues and husbands and knows too many herbs. Her crow doesn't help her case. You talk about tithes, missing chickens, and the weather, filling the silence because company beats the plow. A friar once said late 14th century villagers pushed for self-governance. Courts, councils. Lords didn't like it, but the desire to control your fate simmers. You feel it every time the bailiff docks grain or the priest demands tithes in French silk. There's a village tale. Every 7 years, the soil curses plows, blades break, oxen go lame, nothing grows but thistles. They say it happened during the double frost, when snow fell in June and scurvy took teeth. Your plow's been acting odd, but you're not sure it's cursed. You and Alric stand, knees crackling, and return to work. The oxen, lying in the grass, hope you'll forget. Back at it, you sigh. Before the clouds change their mind, Alric replies. Step, haul, curse, repeat. The afternoon blurs in a haze of pain and muscle memory. You wonder if rabbits dream, or if anyone's plowed while sleepwalking. wide-eyed exhaustion, dirt under your nails. That's peasant life. By late afternoon, the sun casts a dusty golden light, softening the misery. A breeze, not entirely manure-scented, brings a flicker of contentment. You've worked hard. Maybe the field will be kind. You finish the last row, the plow dropping with a thud. The oxen stop like they've been counting. You mutter thanks. They deserve it more than most. You unhitch them, stretch until your spine cracks like a roof beam, and head back to the village. The air smells of earth, crushed grass, and distant burning. Hopefully not your cottage. Others trickle back from their plots, tools slung over shoulders, faces flushed. A nod, a grunt, camaraderie in weariness. You pass Ida, scolding her son for throwing a frog while collecting eggs. Near the well, young women whisper and laugh about Marion and Father Godric's stable. You steer clear of that drama. The village is a sprawl of cottages, a chapel, a bakehouse, a blacksmith's lean-to, and the manor looming like a smug cat. Smoke drifts from thatched roofs, chickens scatter, a three-legged dog limps by. You pass the alehouse, extra benches in a cottage, tempted by a mug, but firewood and your wife wait. You peer in, two men arm wrestling, a monk dozing, familiar faces half drunk. At home, the air's smoky and warm, smelling of onion, garlic, and root stew. Your wife glances up, confirming you're alive, then returns to stirring. Your youngest clings to your leg. You ruffle their hair with an ox-scented hand. You sit, muscles stiffening, and accept a bowl of thin, hot stew, barley, turnip-like bits, maybe herbs. You eat slowly, soaking up the warmth, ignoring tomorrow's work. Gossip starts around the hearth. Your eldest says Ethel fled the reeves garden without his pants. Your middle child swears a bat from Nan's chimney spoke her name in Latin. You act skeptical, but don't dismiss Latin-speaking bats. A historical note, peasants weren't just farmers. You might weave baskets or thatch roofs for survival. Last year, you traded boots for onions, a miracle. A village belief. Whistling the Ave Maria backward during a thunderstorm saves your roof. Old Olf swears it worked, though he also ate raw nettles for his hearing. You keep it in mind. The church bell rings low, signaling the day's end. Your wife hums a hymn, gathering bowls. The fire dies down, the wind rustles the thatch, and village sounds fade to murmurs. You lie on your straw bed, aching but warm, eyes heavy, listening to the hearth's crackle and the dog's snores. Your children settle into blankets. Your wife sits beside you, exhausted but content. For now, the day is done. The field waits, gossip lingers, chores loom. But in this smoky, stew-scented moment, this life almost feels enough. You wake the next morning to your middle child stepping on your face, aiming for the fire. The cottage is dark, save for faint blue light through the thatch. Smoke clings to everything, your clothes, hair, nose. Your wife's already up, coaxing embers to life with saintly patience. You groan, half greeting, half protest. Another day begins. No resisting it. Now when your fingers are stiff and your knees feel like rocks. The church bell rings, 3 long peals, claiming your time for the manor, the priest, the endless rhythm of bells. You sit up, scratch your neck, and squint at a spider's new web in the rafters. You nod to it like an old friend. The bell rings again. Time to move. The morning bell rings for Matins prayer. You're not required to attend every one. Your work is its own devotion, but the bell marks the day's rhythm. Outside, a rooster crows furiously at the sky, and a peasant yells for it to shut up. You pull on your tunic, damp with yesterday's sweat, smelling of wet wool and exhaustion. Your boots, cold and stiff, crunch with mysterious debris you don't bother removing. The door creaks on its leather hinges as you step outside, breathing in smoke, manure, and a yeasty whiff from the bakehouse. Mist clings low, like the village sleeps under a thin wool blanket. Figures move in the haze. Some trudge to the fields, others to church for prayers. A few carry baskets of bread to the manor kitchens, all guided by bells and obligation. You glance at the chapel, a small stone building built by the Lord's grandfather, more afterthought than divine. Moss grows between the stones. The door leans permanently. It's the heart of village life. Births, deaths, marriages, arguments, celebrations, all converge there. A historical note, bells weren't just for churchgoers. They regulated everything: when to work, eat, pray, stop. Monasteries rang bells 8 times daily. Villages like yours followed a looser schedule. They shaped time, order, control for people without clocks. Father Godric emerges from the chapel, robes flapping dramatically. Portly, with permanent frown lines and a suspiciously well-fed look, he likely gets his wine through quiet deals with the manor. He waves tiredly. Most ignore him. You nod politely and move on. A quirky superstition. The church bell repels demons, but only if rung with clean hands. Last winter, the bell ringer's manure-stained nails preceded a storm that tore off half the chapel roof. Coincidence? Probably, but no one rings it barehanded now. Your wife hands you a cloth bundle for midday, likely bread and something pickled. You kiss her forehead. She accepts without looking up, busy mending your eldest's tunic, muttering about holes and laziness. You head to the fields, passing villagers at work. Wolfstan the thatcher and his sons squint at the sky, fixing a roof. Edith the spinner waves, her fingers a blur through wool. Everyone has their job, their rhythm. You think of Father Godric, who's lately fixated on sin. Yours, everyone's. He claims original sin causes crop failures and dry cows, fixable only with extra church attention and coin. It highlights the village's tension between piety and practicality. You believe in God, saints, relics, holy days, fasting, purgatory. But you also trust your grandmother's cradle charms, the moon, certain herbs, avoiding nail-cutting on Wednesdays. You cross yourself at the chapel, spit when a blackbird sings at night, just in case. The village walks a narrow bridge between sacred and suspicious. Everyone attends Mass, lights candles for the dead, but avoids the old standing stone on Midsummer's Eve. Some elders debate trusting the church. Some say monks hide secret knowledge in forbidden books. Others call priests clever talkers in fancy robes. You don't know what to believe, just that you must work, pray, and listen to the bells. By mid-morning, you're in the fields, pressing the plow into damp earth, guiding the oxen with grunts and heel kicks. The bell rings for terse like a frying pan hit with a spoon. Not divine, but it keeps the day moving. So do you, bell to bell, season to season. Time belongs to the land, church, and Lord. You, mud-caked and sore, belong to them all. The afternoon air grows heavy, the sky undecided. Rain, thunder, or just a bad mood. You trudge from the fields, cart creaking, oxen plodding with existential dread. The reeves stands by the grain barn, arms crossed, his face a mix of disapproval and hunger. He nods curtly, you nod back. He once fined a boy 2 eggs for sneezing during prayers. Not a lord or priest, but with enough power to annoy, he oversees labor, finds shirkers, manages tools, and collects dues. So many dues. You unyoke the oxen, give them a half-hearted pat. One snorts, snot narrowly missing your leg. A thank you, you suppose. Back at the cottage, you roll your shoulders, try not to think how little of today's work was yours. You've known since childhood, obligations tower over you. Rent to the Lord for land your family has farmed for generations. Tithes, 10% of your food, not profit, to the church. Labor dues, working the Lord's fields, livestock, fences for free. Last autumn, you fixed his hunting road bridge while your crops rotted. The bailiff called it an honor. You bit your tongue to keep your teeth. Inside, your wife sorts last week's harvest. Good turnips in one basket, soft ones for stew. Your eldest splits kindling with a dull knife. Your youngest tries feeding the cat something barely bred. You sit, letting the day's weight drain. Your wife, good with numbers despite never touching parchment, calculates what you owe the Lord, rats, mold, or the neighbor who borrows. She hums an old tune as she works. A historical fact: peasant taxes weren't just financial but physical. Scutage, paying to avoid military service, was for those above you. Tallage, a land tax, hit you hard, arbitrary and unwritten, shifting yearly. A sheaf of grain, 3 chickens, unpaid road work. The reeve appears at your door, clearing his throat like a toad. You rise, wipe your hands, and offer a neutral face reserved for wolves, tax collectors, and drunk monks. Evening, he says, eyeing your cottage for hidden gold. Evening, you reply. He reminds you of boon work, extra labor on the Lord's fields tomorrow, sun up to dusk, bringing your tools and oxen. You nod. He nods, then leaves. Your weeding and fence-mending plans vanish. Your hands tremble. Exhaustion or rage, hard to tell. Your wife sets stew before you. Always stew. A quirky belief. Burying a coin under the threshold protects against greedy officials. You tried it with a bent penny and a prayer to St. Cuthbert. A week later, the reeve demanded your extra chicken. Maybe the coin wasn't enough, or Street Cuthbert doesn't take tips. After dinner, you walk to the field's edge, where barley rustles under long shadows. Did your great-grandfather stand here, wondering if this is all there is? Scholars debate if peasants contemplated rebellion before 1381. Some say you were too broken, too obedient, too scared of divine wrath. Others see a simmering fire waiting for a spark. You're no revolutionary, but you think about fairness and how far people bend before breaking. You return under a star-smeared sky. The reeve's lantern flickers ahead, like a ghost sigh. You bolt the cottage door and collapse in a straw and blankets. Tomorrow's labor isn't yours, but tonight, your time is. Morning comes too soon, your mouth tasting of old cheese and bad dreams, your neck protesting life itself. You roll from the straw, joints cracking like cartwheels on cobblestone. Today's a feast day, St. Walburga's or Wally Day, as your kids whisper. It sounds like food and rest, but it's mostly different work. No plowing, just performing. You'll attend Mass, bow, murmur, pretend to understand Father Godric's Latin, then clean the churchyard, prepare the communal meal, wear your best cloak for the procession, and maybe eat a sausage if no one sneezes on it. You must bring an offering, bread, ale, eggs, anything edible, even if you've barely scraped by. Your wife wraps soft cheese in linen, guarding it like treasure. You splash water on your face, tame your hair, flatten your tunic. The village scrubs and patches, the wind holding off smoke. The chapel bell rings, longer and ceremonial. Father Godric demands punctuality and reverence. Tough when your shoes don't match and a child cries over stolen bread crust. You join the colorful crowd, garlands, better cloaks, kids with wooden saints on strings. Inside, Father Godric wears faded red vestments smelling of wine and wax. The altar holds wheat sheaves and a wooden St. Walburga, judging slightly. You kneel, stand, sit, try not to sleep as he drones about her miracles, curing plague, banishing demons, weeping holy oil. He scolds moral laziness, maybe about Marion and the stable boy. You nod. It's safer. Mass ends. The real work begins. The offering table fills with bread, roots, a prize sausage. Your wife places her cheese discreetly. You fetch wood, set benches by the green. The sun shines, cheerful despite your week of labor. Kids chase chickens. Someone tunes a broken lute. The reeve argues with Nan over her potent onion stew. A historical fact. Feast days numbered over 80 yearly, a fifth of the calendar. They sound like days off, but involve tithes, preparation, and guilt. Often more effort than workdays. Fires lit, pots bubbling, people relax. Laughter, clapping, singing erupt. A group reenacts St. Walburga's miracle. One cloaked figure playing possessed, hilarious, blasphemous. You laugh, bowl in hand, watching kids tumble, a dog steal a bun, a neighbor's sleeve catch fire, a lute string snap unnoticed. A tradition. Unmarried villagers wear wildflowers for love dreams, or espouse with cows. Your eldest, flowers behind their ear, lingers near the reeve's niece. You hide a smirk. As shadows stretch, Father Godric, half drunk on rabbit stew, mumbles a final prayer. You bow, whispering your own to clouds, crops, fields. Were feast days for rest or control? Did the church and manor keep you sane or obedient? You don't know. The food's gone, the fire's dying, your back hurts. You clean up, Walk home under stars, your kids collapsing sticky with honey and soot. Tomorrow the plow waits, but tonight there was stew and song. The cottage is stifling, heavy with the sour smell of too many people sleeping close for too many nights. Summer creeps through the thatch, uncaring. You wipe sweat, wondering how a place can freeze half the year and boil the other. Your family sprawls in a tangle of limbs and blankets, your wife's arm over your youngest, an older child snoring in the Goodwill blanket the mice haven't ruined. You step over a sleeping chicken who thinks she owns the place, and onto the dirt floor, cold, staining, sprouting mushrooms in damp weather. It's better than a lean-to or under a wagon. Outside, a rooster demands applause. Someone chops wood, pigs squeal by the stream. Your wife kindles the fire, sweeps soot, mutters about the chimney needing replacement. Neither of you expect divine home repair. She hands you a tough bread crust. You gnaw it gratefully. The kids squabble over fetching water. You settle it. The loudest complainer goes. Your eldest stomps off, muttering about fairness. A historical fact. The average peasant house was 12 by 20 feet, one room, maybe two if your grandfather did well. It held family, food, tools, animals, sometimes a sick cousin during plagues. No privacy, no escape, shared life. The beams above are smoke-darkened. The thatch sags. A spiderweb drapes like a faded curtain. The grain chest is locked. Not distrusting family, but temptation. The big pot, always on the hearth, boils stew, dyes cloth, washes babies, softens bark. You step over the chicken, who glares, and head out, sweating before you start. The fence sags where a pig leaned. You fix it before the reeve finds you for livestock in the Lord's barley. Your rusty tools make it slow, the pig watching like she's planning her next break. Your wife needs laundry water, so you join the well queue, hearing gossip, a light in the woods last night, drunk with a torch, or a ghost riding a ferry, per village logic. At home, your wife scrubs your good tunic with oniony soap bartered from Edith. You retreat before she enlists you. The kids wrestle. The chicken lays an egg in your boot. The fire smokes successively. You open the door, tempted to flee to the woods. A quirky fact. Peasants had benches or stools, not chairs. Tables were planks on barrels. You ate when food was hot, hoping the dog didn't get it. The midday bell, sexed, sounds like a droning hum and a clank, slicing the day for someone else's holiness. Was this one-room life miserable or just different? Some historians say communal living built strong bonds, resilience. Others call it dehumanizing, no privacy, no quiet. You lean toward the latter. It's loud, fire crackling, kids fighting, breeze whistling. Yet, you make it work. The sun's heat turns oppressive, clinging to your skin, punishing every task. You've hauled water, half-fixed a fence, failed to clear a hornet's nest with a stick and curses. No clean rags left, your kids will like herbs. You sit debating clearing nettles when the itching starts, not ignorable, but a full-body, hair-infested scream. Lice. You've been here before, everyone has. Lice, fleas, mites, even ringworm from a goose are normal. Sores and scabs are unremarkable and less oozing. Bathing's rare, maybe monthly in streams, with lumpy soap smelling of regret. You scratch your ear, elbow, under your shirt where something moves. Your wife warns not to scratch, as if that's possible. They're forming a union, you mutter. She's unamused. You consider boiling your shirt, but last time it shrank stiffer than a bishop's collar. You lean against the pigsty fence for a breeze, and flies. Edric passes, scratching with a stick, wheezing. You nod. He nods. Itchy brotherhood. He mentions Marud's boys have St. Anthony's fire again. Ergotism from bad rye, causing burning skin, hallucinations, seizures, gangrene. You'll check your grain. A quirky belief. Mold spirits cause it, banished by sweeping the grain floor counterclockwise while singing a hymn backward. Nan swears by it, but she talks to her sheep like royalty. Your wife boils laundry water, eyeing your blotchy shirt. Off, she says. You strip, and she dabs vinegar on your red patches, muttering a prayer, sounding like a threat. It stings. You try not to hiss. Your daughter scratches too, denying it. Your wife pins her, combing for lice eggs with a worn comb, cursing like a sailor. The child screams. The family waits their turn. Scholars debate if lice were just accepted or a source of shame and exhaustion. You lean toward the latter. Itching ruins sleep closed days. A friar's clean robes and rosemary remedy failed. Your wife's nettle vinegar soak for your rashy shins might not either. But you try because you must. The water stings, but it's a different kind of pain, clean pain. You lean back, close your eyes, and pretend, for a moment, that you're in a bathhouse in some far-off town where people don't scratch their necks every 5 seconds. The illusion shatters when the baby throws a handful of grain into your face. You sputter, blink, and laugh in spite of yourself. Your wife rolls her eyes and pulls the child away before she can start feeding grain to the fire. Outside, the sun is sliding west, the heat fading into a slow, golden warmth on the walls of your cottage. Dinner will be simple tonight. Barley stew, maybe with a bit of cabbage if it hasn't wilted in his soup already. You'll eat on your stool, swatting flies with one hand and scratching with the other. Afterward, your wife will comb your scalp and apply that same nettle and vinegar concoction while you grit your teeth and try not to scream. This is the other kind of plague, the everyday, skin devil misery, the invisible creatures that feast on your blood and laugh in your ears. And yet you endure, because what's the alternative? You itch, you sleep, you wake, and tomorrow you do it all again. You're not sure what woke you this morning. The smell of something burning, the sharp scream of a goose in distress, or the fact that the entire village seems to be shouting all at once. You're on your feet before your brain catches up, stumbling toward the door and tripping over your youngest, who's asleep in what looks like a pile of firewood. You push open the door to chaos. The sun is barely up, but a crowd is already forming outside the smithy. Someone's yelling about curses again. 2 dogs are fighting over what might be a dead squirrel. The reeve is marching toward the commotion with the kind of expression that says, today is going to be deeply unpleasant for someone, probably you. You wander toward the noise, curiosity outweighing the dread curling in your belly. The crowd parts, revealing the cause of all the fuss, old Nan. Barefoot, wild-haired, waving a wooden spoon like a sword, she's screaming at Ethelred the carpenter. He accused my pig of witchcraft, she howls. Ethelred, red-faced, tries to talk over her. I said your pig stared at me funny. Just looked at me. That's not natural. The crowd ripples with laughter, but no one sides with old Nan outright. Even if no one truly believes she's a witch, no one's foolish enough to test it. The reeve arrives and immediately starts shouting, his preferred method of conflict resolution. He waves his arms, demands silence, and, lacking any real solution, declares a hearing at midday on the village green. Everyone must attend. You sigh. Work is canceled until the afternoon, and your half-size hot patch will have to wait again. Back home, your wife stirs the morning porridge, already aware of the situation. Let me guess, she says. Someone's possessed or hexed or lost a goat, and now they're blaming poor Nan. You sit down, rubbing your temples. Ethelred says her pig gave him a dirty look. She snorts. If I banished everyone who looked at me wrong, this village would be empty by Lent. The children are thrilled. A public hearing means gossip, a break from chores, and possibly someone falling into the duck pond. By noon, the green is crowded. Father Godric stands off to the side, muttering in Latin, probably here for the bread. The reeve climbs onto a broken cart to act as a judge's platform. Old Nan is dragged forward, grumbling, while Ethelred tries to look like a reasonable man whose ego hasn't just been trampled. He claims the pig not only looked at him wrong, but followed him, grunting menacingly. His wife had a nosebleed that same evening, surely no coincidence, then calls him a turnip-brained donkey and insists her pig follows everyone. Witnesses are called. Wulfstan the Thatcher claims he saw the pig sniffing near the churchyard, suspicious behavior in his mind. More the miller's wife says it once chewed her washing line. Your eldest admits the pig stared at them, but they were holding a carrot. Someone brings up the time and cured boils with frog spit and willow bark. Someone else swears she mutters to her cat in Latin. Eventually, someone suggests a trial by water. The reeve loves the idea. The pig will be placed in the duck pond. If it floats suspiciously, Nin must answer for it. The pig, calm and dignified, is lowered into the pond. It floats, gasps, smugness from Ethelred. Nan rolls her eyes. Of course he floats, you cabbage. He's fat. After some laughter and awkward silence, the reeve declares no crime committed, but the pig must be confined. The crowd disperses, muttering about wasted mornings. You return to your work, shaking your head at another round of pig-based justice. Scholars argue whether medieval peasants truly believed in these trials or tolerated them as entertainment. You think people were bored, overworked, and hungry for anything to talk about that wasn't turnips or taxes. That night, you're woken again, this time by your daughter whispering urgently. The reeve's niece is getting married, she says. Details are vague, rumors of bribes, avoiding mill taxes, and possible sheep involvement. But your wife confirms it's happening today. A small feast at the chapel, dancing, maybe even a hog roast, which means you'll need a scrub. Bathing is an ordeal. You brave the cold creek, wash your hair, and endure the laughter of a group of boys on a bank. It's all part of the sacred tradition of not embarrassing your wife in public. Marriage among peasants isn't about love. It's about land, inheritance, and livestock, especially pigs. Most peasants can't marry without their lord's permission, sometimes paying for the privilege. The village gathers at the green. The bride is clean, wears shoes, and owns a rabbit fur-lined cloak, practically royalty. The groom is a stranger from 2 villages over. The ceremony is short, the Latin vows mumbled into English for the crowd's benefit. Then comes the feast, roasted hog, bread, cabbage, and a small cask of ale guarded by the reeve. Dancing grows raucous. Children fall into wash tubs. Someone attempts to juggle onions. Some villages lead the couple straight to their bed for the community to witness. Yours, thankfully, only does the symbolic version. You eat with Alric, exchanging cynical bets on how long the groom will stick around. The meat is salty and perfect. Your wife is laughing in a way you haven't heard in weeks. Night falls. Fires burn low. The bride and groom disappear into the reeve's cottage. You walk home with your wife and children, feet aching but heart lighter. Weddings aren't about joy. They're about continuity. Proof that life will keep going, no matter the taxes, the weather, or the bugs. Morning brings shouting, your middle child pointing toward the common pasture. Your eldest is halfway up a wall by the sheep enclosure, trying to retrieve her rag-and-string kite. You haul her down with mild scolding, knowing she'll make up for it with extra chores. Children in your world aren't children in the modern sense. They are small, wiggling, unpaid laborers essential to survival. You have 5 children. You used to have 6. The one who didn't make it past his second winter still lingers in your thoughts. In your village, 30 to 50% of children don't live to adulthood. The eldest, now 13, is strong, skilled, and soon to be marriageable. The youngest, 4, still wobbles when he runs. After the kite incident, your wife takes the children herb gathering near the woods. You work alone in the fields, grateful for the quiet. The children return muddy and triumphant, your wife's arms full of green bundles. One child has put a frog in the water bucket. Dinner that night is warm and quiet. The children fall asleep tangled together near the hearth. The next day dawns bright and suspiciously blue. You plan to weed the barley and repair a fence, but first you must check with the reeve. He decides what you do. He adjusts your tasks, sending you and your eldest to clear an overgrown path behind the manor. Refusal isn't an option. The path is worse than you remembered. Fallen trees, tangled undergrowth, biting insects. Your daughter asks why the reeve always chooses you. Because we don't complain. Loudly, you say. Midday, the reeve appears on a borrowed pony, inspects your work, and orders you to keep it clear for the Lord's cousin's visit. You hold your tongue, as does your daughter, though not without visible effort. By evening, the path is passable. On the walk home, she points out clouds shaped like goats and the reeve falling into a dish. At home, your wife stirs garlic and barley stew. The younger children are half asleep. Your daughter wonders aloud if they'll ever stop bossing you around. You stare into the fire. Not unless something big changes. The next morning, you wake to the sharp, acidic smell of worry. Your wife is crouched by the grain chest, the lid open. The grain is low, dangerously low. Rat droppings line the edge, mold creeping up one corner. You calculate quickly. How much is left? How long until harvest? How far you can stretch turnips before hunger turns everyone hollow-eyed? The answer isn't good. You've entered the hungry gap, the months between late winter and midsummer when last year's food runs out, but this year's harvest isn't in. If you're lucky, your stores last. If you're really lucky, rats and rot haven't claimed them. This year, you're somewhere in between. Not starving, not safe, just existing in that uneasy gray where every meal is a gamble and every scrap a decision. The potatoes are nearly gone. The beans are dry and crumbling. You still have some barley, but not enough. And there's still a month, at least, before anything fresh is ready to pick. Breakfast is thin gruel. Your youngest doesn't complain. He just stares at the bowl and then at your wife like maybe she's hiding the good food somewhere and just forgot to share. You look away. You don't want to see that look. Later, you walk down to the common pasture where Alric is sharpening his scythe, even though there's nothing to cut yet. He looks up and sees the same hunger shadow in your face that you see in his. "Rats out my oats," he says. You nod. "I caught one in the grain bin yesterday," he adds. Big as a cat. Looked me in the eye like he owned the place. "Maybe he does," you mutter. There's a silent understanding between you. The next few weeks are going to be hard, harder than usual. And that means everyone in the village will be watching each other a little more closely, counting who's got meat, who's bartering, who's stealing. Hunger doesn't just thin the belly, it thins trust. Here's a historical fact to chew on, assuming you've got anything to chew. The hungry gap was a seasonal threat in medieval agricultural life, especially in Northern Europe. With no refrigeration, no imports, and only limited preservation methods, communities often ran dangerously low on food right before the growing season kicked off. Bad weather, spoiled storage, or pests could turn a lean year into a deadly one. You return to your plot and start digging. Not because anything needs digging right now, but because movement helps quiet the stomach. The soil is hard, dry in patches, and soggy in others. Typical spring behavior. You clear a few weeds, throw some compost, and try not to think about dinner. Your wife stops by later with a bundle of greens. Not the kind you buy in markets, but the kind you forage from roadsides and forest edges. Dandelion leaves, sorrel, maybe a few nettles if you're lucky. She boils them into a soup that tastes like bitterness and hope. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the day. In your village, people whisper that the first person to eat nettles in spring gains the strength of 10 men, but only if they do it while barefoot and facing east. You've tried it. All you got was stung toes and a sneezing fit. Still, you eat the nettle soup anyway because, myth or not, it fills your gut. That evening, the chapel bell rings early, Vespers. Father Godric is calling for a prayer gathering. You don't need to ask why. He knows what season it is, too. And when people get hungry, they get desperate. And when they get desperate, they do things that saints can't always forgive. You and your family file into the chapel with the rest of the village. Everyone's eyes are dull, cheeks a little sunken, hands twitchy. Father Godric lights candles and talks about endurance, about suffering bringing us closer to God. He talks about how St. Cathart once fasted for a month, surviving on nothing but water and faith. You're not sure you believe that, but you nod along anyway. After the service, you walk home in silence. The moon is low and yellow. The breeze carries the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. You pass the bakehouse and catch a whiff of bread. Not your bread, Lord's bread. Probably made with the last of the good flour. You tuck your children into their blankets and pull yours tighter around your shoulders. Your wife is already asleep, her face pale and pinched. You lie awake a little longer, listening to the wind, to the sounds of your neighbors moving quietly in the dark, and to your own belly complaining softly. There's an open scholarly debate about how well medieval communities cooperated during lean times. Some argue peasants were tightly knit, sharing resources and helping each other through hardship. Others insist competition was fierce, especially when survival was at stake. You've seen both. You've seen neighbors share their last turnip, and you've seen someone chase off a child with a stick for trying to pick wild onions. In the end, it's about the math. How much food, how many mouths, how long until the garden gives back. And tonight, the numbers don't look good. But tomorrow you'll rise. You'll dig. You'll forage. You'll try, because that's all there is. Until the beans sprout, until the grain ripens, until your belly quiets, until the gap ends. It's just past dawn when you hear the clink of metal and the uneven shuffle of hooves on stone. You roll out of bed and peek out the cottage door, rubbing sleep from your eyes. A rider is passing through the village. Not a lord, not a knight, but a friar. You can tell by the patchy robe, the tattered sandals, and the way he leans into each step like he's carrying all the sins of England on his back, which, to be fair, might not be far from the truth. He's youngish, lean like a reed with sharp eyes and a voice that rings out as he passes. Blessings of St. James upon you, good folk. Confess your sins, feed your soul, and share your bread with the Lord's humble servant. Your wife mutters something under her breath that rhymes with fat chance. The children gather at the doorway, peeking out like rabbits. They've seen traveling friars before, but they always hope the next one will be more interesting. Spoiler, he won't be. You step out into the morning, the air already warm and buzzing with flies. You're tempted to go straight to the field, skip the church talk, but you know better. Ignoring a friar is bad form, and ignoring this one, with his booming voice and theatrics, might land you on the receiving end of a public rebuke again. So you follow the stream of villagers shuffling toward the chapel square. The friar is standing on a half-rotted crate, waving his arms like he's trying to fly. He launches into a fiery sermon about gluttony, envy, pride, and whatever other sins are currently fashionable. You catch about half of it. The rest is buried under the rumble of your stomach and a murmur of gossip from the crowd. He's a good speaker, this one. Too good. Makes you suspicious. Any man who can get people to part with their last crust of bread while smiling about it is probably not as humble as he claims. You eye his satchel, which jingles with more than rosary beads. And now comes the part you've been dreading, the confession. He invites everyone in that sing-song voice to step forward and unburden their souls. The Lord, he says, wants your honesty. He already knows your sins. He just wants you to admit them. You keep your head down, not because you've done anything wrong, at least nothing spectacular, but because you haven't done anything right either. You've thought ill of the reeve daily. You cursed at a pig yesterday. You wished mildew upon the Lord's grain stores. Are those sins? Probably, but they're also survival. Your neighbor, Alric, steps forward and murmurs something to the friar, who blesses him dramatically and hands him a small wooden token, a penitent's chip. Another woman follows, and then a few more. You watch them shuffle away, lighter in spirit and heavier in guilt. And then the friar turns toward you. You, he says, pointing with one bony finger. You've got the look of a man burdened by silence. You consider running, just bolting into the barley and hiding for a week. Instead, you step forward, hat in hand, and mutter something vague about impure thoughts and frustration with daily toil. He nods solemnly, touches your forehead with 2 fingers, and whispers a Latin prayer that smells faintly of garlic and cheap ale. Then he leans in closer and says, "Sin leaves a scent, my son. Yours is thick." You blink. "Excuse me." He smiles. Just a figure of speech. You're not so sure. Here's your historical fact for the day. Traveling friars were common in medieval Europe, often moving from village to preach, offer confessions, and collect alms. Unlike monks, they didn't live in monasteries. They were itinerant, bound to their orders, but always on the move. Some were pious, some were frauds, and some blurred the line, so well you couldn't tell where devotion ended and calm began. Back at home, your wife asks what you confessed. "I told him I yelled at a sheep," you say. She nods. "Reasonable." "And he told me I smell like sin." She pauses, then hands you a bucket of water. Well, he's not wrong. You wash your face at the doorstep while the friar walks the village, knocking on doors, collecting coins and scraps and prayers. He stops by Old Nan's hut, but doesn't go in. Wise move. She once made a friar's nose bleed just by glaring at him. By midday, the friars gathered a fair haul, some bread, 2 eggs, and what might be a dried fish. He stands at the center of the green, raises his arms, and offers a final blessing. May St. James walk beside you in shadow and light, he says, and may your sins be lighter than your bellies. Then he's gone. Your daughter tugs on your sleeve. Duh, she whispers. Do you think he really smells sins? You look down at her, consider lying, then shake your head. No, I think he smells onions. She giggles. Here's your quirky fact. In your village, there's a superstition that friars carry enchanted bones. Not relics, but actual cursed bones that make cows barren if you offend them. You've never seen proof, but no one dares test it. When a friar scowls at a cow, someone always brings him cheese. That night, after the fires die down and the cottage is quiet, you lie in bed thinking about what you didn't confess. The times you've wished the Lord's wine would turn to vinegar, the nights you've prayed to saints you barely remember, the hunger you've carried like a second skin. You didn't say any of that. You didn't need to. There's an open scholarly debate about how sincerely peasants embraced religion. Some say faith was the backbone of daily life, woven into every task and word. Others argue that it was a necessary performance, something you did because you had to, because not doing it meant being labeled, shunned, or punished. You think it's both. You believe in God, sure, but you also believe in not starving and in not making the friar angry just in case he really can smell something on you. Tomorrow, he'll be gone. The hunger will still be here. The sins, too. But for tonight, you're clean or close enough. You still have some barley, but not enough. And there's still a month, at least, before anything fresh is ready to pick. Breakfast is thin gruel. Your youngest doesn't complain, and he just stares at the bowl and then at your wife like maybe she's hiding the good food somewhere and just forgot to share. You look away. You don't want to see that look. Later, you walk down to the common pasture where Alric is sharpening his scythe, even though there's nothing to cut yet. He looks up and sees the same hunger shadow in your face that you see in his. Rats out my oats, he says. You nod. I caught one in the grain bin yesterday, he adds. Big as a cat. Looked me in the eye like he owned the place. Maybe he does, you mutter. There's a silent understanding between you. The next few weeks are going to be hard, harder than usual. And that means everyone in the village will be watching each other a little more closely, counting who's got meat, who's bartering, who's stealing. Hunger doesn't just thin the belly, it thins trust. Here's a historical fact to chew on, assuming you've got anything to chew. The hungry gap was a seasonal threat in medieval agricultural life, especially in Northern Europe. With no refrigeration, no imports, and only limited preservation methods, communities often ran dangerously low on food right before the growing season kicked off. Bad weather, spoiled storage, or pests could turn a lean year into a deadly one. You return to your plot and start digging. Not because anything needs digging right now, but because movement helps quiet the stomach. The soil is hard, dry in patches and soggy in others. Typical spring behavior. You clear a few weeds, throw some compost, and try not to think about dinner. Your wife stops by later with a bundle of greens. Not the kind you buy in markets, but the kind you forage from roadsides and forest edges. Dandelion leaves, sorrel, maybe a few nettles if you're lucky. She boils them into a soup that tastes like bitterness and hope. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the day. In your village, people whisper that the first person to eat nettles in spring gains the strength of 10 men. But only if they do it while barefoot and facing east. You tried it. All you got was stung toes and a sneezing fit. Still, you eat the nettle soup anyway because, myth or not, it fills your gut. That evening, the chapel bell rings early. Vespers. Father Godric is calling for a prayer gathering. You don't need to ask why. He knows what season it is, too. And when people get hungry, they get desperate. And when they get desperate, they do things that saints can't always forgive. You and your family file into the chapel with the rest of the village. Everyone's eyes are dull, cheeks a little sunken, hands twitchy. Father Godric lights candles and talks about endurance, about suffering bringing us closer to God. He talks about how Street Cuthbert once fasted for a month, surviving on nothing but water and faith. You're not sure you believe that, but you nod along anyway. After the service, you walk home in silence. The moon is low and yellow. The breeze carries the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. You pass the bakehouse and catch a whiff of bread. Not your bread, of course, Lord's bread. Probably made with the last of the good flour. You tuck your children into their blankets and pull yours tighter around your shoulders. Your wife is already asleep, her face pale and pinched. You lie awake a little longer, listening to the wind, to the sounds of your neighbors moving quietly in the dark, and to your own belly complaining softly. There's an open scholarly debate about how well medieval communities cooperated during lean times. Some argue peasants were tightly knit, sharing resources and helping each other through hardship. Others insist competition was fierce, especially when survival was at stake. You've seen both. You've seen neighbors share their last turnip, and you've seen someone chase off a child with a stick for trying to pick wild onions. In the end, it's about the math. How much food? How many mouths? How long until the garden gives back? And tonight, the numbers don't look good. But tomorrow you'll rise. You'll dig. You'll forage. You'll try because that's all there is. Until the beans sprout, until the grain ripens, until your belly quiets, until the gap ends. It's just passed on when you hear the clink of metal and the uneven shuffle of hooves on stone. You roll out of bed and peek out the cottage door, rubbing sleep from your eyes. A rider is passing through the village. Not a lord, not a knight, but a friar. You can tell by the patchy robe, the tattered sandals, and the way he leans into each step like he's carrying all the sins of England on his back, which, to be fair, might not be far from the truth. He's youngish, lean like a reed with sharp eyes and a voice that rings out as he passes. Blessings of St. James upon you, good folk. Confess your sins, feed your soul, and share your bread with the Lord's humble servant. Your wife mutters something under her breath that rhymes with fat chance. The children gather at the doorway, peeking out like rabbits. They've seen traveling friars before, but they always hope the next one will be more interesting. Spoiler, he won't be. You step out into the morning, the air already warm and buzzing with flies. You're tempted to go straight to the field, skip the church talk, but you know better. Ignoring a friar is bad form. And ignoring this one with his booming voice and theatrics might land you on the receiving end of a public rebuke again. So you follow the stream of villagers shuffling toward the chapel square. The friar is standing on a half-rotted crate, waving his arms like he's trying to fly. He launches into a fiery sermon about gluttony, envy, pride, and whatever other sins are currently fashionable. You catch about half of it. The rest is buried under the rumble of your stomach and the murmur of gossip from the crowd. He's a good speaker, this one. Too good. Makes you suspicious. Any man who can get people to part with their last crust of bread while smiling about it is probably not as humble as he claims. You eye his satchel, which jingles with more than rosary beads. And now comes the part you've been dreading, the confession. He invites everyone in that sing-song voice to step forward and unburden their souls. The Lord, he says, wants your honesty. He already knows your sins. He just wants you to admit them. You keep your head down. Not because you've done anything wrong, at least nothing spectacular, but because you haven't done anything rather either. You've thought ill of the reeve daily. You cursed at a pig yesterday. You wished mildew upon the Lord's grain stores. Are those sins? Probably. But they're also survival. Your neighbor, Ulrich, steps forward and murmurs something to the friar, who blesses him dramatically and hands him a small wooden token, a penitent's chip. Another woman follows, and then a few more. You watch them shuffle away, lighter in spirit and heavier in guilt. And then the friar turns toward you. He says, pointing with one bony finger. You got the look of a man burdened by silence. You consider running. Just bolt into the barley and hide for a week. Instead, you step forward, hat in hand, and mutter something vague about impure thoughts and frustration with daily toil. He nods solemnly, touches your forehead with 2 fingers, and whispers a Latin prayer that smells faintly of garlic and cheap ale. Then he leans in closer and says, "Sin leaves a scent, my son. Yours is thick." You blink. "Excuse me." He smiles. Just a figure of speech. You're not so sure. Here's your historical fact for the day. Traveling friars were common in medieval Europe, often moving from village to preach, offer confessions, and collect alms. Unlike monks, they didn't live in monasteries. They were itinerant, bound to their orders, but always on the move. Some were pious, some were frauds, and some blurred the line, so well you couldn't tell where devotion ended and calm began. Back at home, your wife asks what you confessed. I told him I yelled at a sheep, you say? She nods. Reasonable. And he told me I smell like sin. She pauses, then hands you a bucket of water. Well, he's not wrong. You wash your face at the doorstep while the friar walks the village, knocking on doors, collecting coins and scraps and prayers. He stops by Old Man's hut, but doesn't go in. Wise move. She once made a friar's nose bleed just by glaring at him. By midday, the friar has gathered a fair haul, some bread, 2 eggs, and what might be a dried fish. He stands at the center of the green, raises his arms, and offers a final blessing. May St. James walk beside you in shadow and light, he says, and may your sins be lighter than your bellies. Then he's gone. Your daughter tugs on your sleeve. Duh, she whispers. Do you think he really smells sins? You look down at her, consider lying, then shake your head. No, I think he smells onions. She giggles. Here's your quirky fact. In your village, there's a superstition that friars carry enchanted bones. Not relics, but actual curse bones that make cows barren if you offend them. You've never seen precise proof, but no one dares test it. When a friar scowls at a cow, someone always brings him cheese. That night, after the fires die down and the cottage is quiet, you lie in bed thinking about what you didn't confess. The times you've wished the Lord's wine would turn to vinegar. The nights you've prayed to saints you barely remember. The hunger you've carried like a second skin. You didn't say any of that. You didn't need to. There's an open scholarly debate about how sincerely peasants embraced religion. Some say faith was the backbone of daily life woven into every task and word. Others argue that it was a necessary performance, something you did because you had to, because not doing it meant being labeled, shunned, or punished. You think it's both. You believe in God, sure, but you also believe in not starving and in not making the friar angry just in case he really can smell something on you. Tomorrow, he'll be gone. The hunger will still be here. The sins, too. But for tonight, you're clean or close enough. By the time late autumn gives way to early winter, the whole village starts to smell like damp wool, mold, and old onions. You've given up pretending that things are drying nicely in the cottage. Everything is wet. Your boots, your blankets, and your thoughts. The inside of your home feels like the inside of a sheep's lung, and you're not entirely sure it's healthier. You wake to the sound of something scuttling across the rafters. Could be a mouse, could be a rat, could be a family of either, frankly. You lie still for a moment, listening, before deciding it's not worth investigating until it falls directly onto your face. You roll over. Cold straw pokes through your blanket and into your ribs. You shift again, still poking, you sigh and give up. Your breath fogs in the air as you sit up. It's cold enough that your feet go numb before they even hit the floor. The fire's long since gone out. You huddle over the hearth and poke at the ashes, trying to resurrect a flame from last night's embers. But it's no good. The wood's damp. Everything's damp. You'd kill for some dry peat, or just a week of sun, or honestly, a blanket that doesn't smell like cheese. Your wife is already up trying to dry the baby's blanket near the hearth while muttering about mildew and bad omens. She points to the roof. It's leaking again. You squint upward and see the dark stain of water creeping across the thatch like a slow-moving spider. It'll only get worse. And patching it now, in this weather, is like putting a fig leaf on a broken cartwheel. Your daughter coughs behind you. One of those deep, rattly coughs that makes you wince. Everyone's coughing now. It's not sickness yet, but it's close. The kind of persistent cold that lives in the walls, in your lungs, in your bones. And once it takes hold, it doesn't let go. Breakfast is stale bread soaked in hot water. You chew it slowly and try to pretend it's soup. The kids pick at theirs, faces pale, eyes ringed. The baby snuffles, congested and irritable. Your wife wipes his nose with the hem of her tunic and doesn't even flinch when he sneezes on her shoulder. Here's a historical fact that might make you grateful for your own warm, rat-free home. Medieval peasant homes had no insulation, no chimneys, and very little protection from the elements. You live alongside your livestock because their body heat made the room a little warmer. Your windows, if you had any, were unglazed. Just wooden shutters or oilcloth. Every winter was a gamble. Every winter could be the one that took someone. The worst part, though, isn't the cold, it's the boredom. In the warmer months, you're so busy you barely have time to think. But now, the fields are resting. The animals are huddled in pens. The days are short. The nights are endless. And your options for entertainment include listening to rats in the walls, trying to dry things that won't, arguing with your spouse about whose turn it is to chase the pig out of the house, staring into the fire, and wondering if spring will ever come again. You choose option 4. Around midday, Hour comes by with a bundle of damp firewood and a face like someone just told him the ale ran out. Reeve says the road needs clearing. In this weather, you ask? He nods grimly, says, the Lord might travel next week. You both look out the door at the slush-covered track that leads toward the manor. There's less a road and more a pit of despair. You imagine trying to haul a cart through it and laugh. Hour doesn't. You pull on your boots, still wet from yesterday, and follow him to the edge of the village. The road's a mess. Puddles, frozen ruts, and the occasional pile of something you hope is just animal dung. You spend 2 hours with a shovel trying to level it out. By the end, your fingers are numb and your boots are soaked straight through again. You stop by the bakehouse on your way back, not because there's food, but because it's warm. The oven has been lit since dawn, and the smell of toasted barley and smoke is almost enough to distract from the hunger. More the baker gives you a nod. She's got no bread to spare today, but she lets you warm your hands near the stones. You don't speak, she doesn't ask. Here's a quirky local belief you cling to this time of year. If you see a rat leave your house just before dawn, it means someone in the household will die before the thaw. You've seen 3 rats in the last week. You try not to think about it. Rats are everywhere. They don't mean anything, probably. You return home to find your wife scraping mold off a piece of cheese. She cuts off the worst bits and saves the rest. Nothing goes to waste. The children are lying by the hearth, arguing quietly over who gets the driest spot. The baby's finally asleep. The fire crackles weakly. You add one of Auric's damp logs and watch the steam rise off it like smoke from a dying dream. There's an open scholarly debate about how medieval peasants coped emotionally during winter. Some historians argue that spiritual life gave them comfort. Prayers, saints, rituals. Others think they just endured it like livestock without reflection or meaning. You're not sure. Some nights you pray. Some nights you just sit in silence, listening to the wind, try to pry open your roof. That night, the rats are especially loud. One runs across your shelf and knocks down a wooden spoon. It hits the floor with a thud, and your daughter jerks awake. She looks around, eyes wide, then settles back down. You don't sleep much. You lie there cold, listening, hoping the fire holds, hoping the roof holds, hoping you hold. Spring feels like a rumor, a lie people tell to get through the dark, but you tell it anyway. The calendar says it's Sunday, though. Honestly, the days have started blending together like overcooked porridge. You're never quite sure whether it's Friday, or Saint Somebody's Day, or just another ordinary plodding step through mud and mist, but you know it's Sunday because the bells are louder and longer, and because your wife is poking at the children with a stick and yelling about their faces being dirty. Scrub that nose again, she says to the middle one who tries to protest. If the priest can see snot from the altar, that's a mortal sin. You smirk and say nothing, mostly because your own tunic still has pig prints on it, and you're hoping no one notices. Sunday isn't quite a day of rest. Not for your wife, who has to wrangle 4 grubby children into presentable shapes, but it's a shift from the ordinary. No field work, no hauling wood, just church, penance, and the complicated business of balancing between God, gossip, and superstition. You step out into the cool air and hear the familiar sounds of the village doing its Sunday best. Dogs being shooed away, mothers spitting on sleeves to wipe cheeks. A few cracked voices trying to remember the Latin parts of the Mass. And beneath it all, that low thrum of anticipation, the sense that something might happen. Church days always bring a little edge of performance to life. The chapel is already filling up when you arrive. It's a squat stone structure with a roof that leaks in two places and a draft that knows exactly where your neck is. The inside smells of candle wax, old wood, and whatever herbal concoction Father Godric has slathered on his aching joints this week. Last week it was goose fat and crush mint. The smell made 3 kids faint. You fear good. You find a place near the back, safer that way. The front rows are for the manor steward, the reeve, and anyone with clean fingernails. The rest of you shuffle into the shadows and pray the priest doesn't call on you by name. Father Godric begins with a hymn sung so slowly it feels like time is melting. Then he launches into a sermon about Street Bridget and her miracles. Something about curing the blind and boiling demons out of people's stomachs. You try to listen, but your brain keeps drifting. You think about the weather, about the grain store, about whether that rat you saw last night is the same one from last week or a new one. At one point, the priest starts talking about temptations in the woods, and you glance at old Nan, who is already asleep, snoring softly into her scarf. After Mass, the real business of the day begins. People cluster into little knots outside the chapel, trading news, herbs, advice, and subtle accusations. You catch snatches of conversation. Edith's cow gave birth with no tail. Bad omen. Brother Elphick says the comet means judgment's coming. Nan's been walking backward around the chapel again. Says it keeps the spirits out. You nod politely to a few folks, offer half-hearted blessings, and try to edge away toward the safety of your cottage. But then, Father Godric spots you and waves you over. "Ah, my son," he says, placing a heavy, slightly greasy hand on your shoulder. A moment. You brace yourself. The priest means well, you suppose, but his moments tend to feel like interrogations disguised as spiritual guidance. "I noticed your children didn't make the sign of the cross during the creed," he says, eyes narrowed. You shrug. They were distracted by the ceiling drip. He frowns. A soul distracted in prayer is a soul vulnerable to the devil's whisper. You nod solemnly, hoping he'll stop talking. He doesn't. "Tell me," he says, "has your household maintained the fast days? This is tricky. You meant to, but when you're living on dried beans and soup made from weeds and your wife's last nerve, the idea of refusing a hunk of cheese because it's Friday seems a bit ambitious." "We've done our best," you lie. "Your best," he says, "must include vigilance. The saints are watching." And that's the line. That's the thing you've heard your whole life. The saints are watching. The Lord is watching. The devil is watching. It's a wonder you get anything done with so many supernatural eyes on you. Here's a historical fact worth remembering. Christianity in medieval villages was deeply integrated with local life, but not always how the church wanted. Yes, everyone went to church, paid tithes, and feared sin. But they also kept charms under their pillows, whispered old pagan prayers during storms, and swore by saints the church didn't even officially recognize. It was a patchwork of belief stitched together from desperation and tradition. You thank Father Godric and finally escape, only to find your daughter crouched behind the chapel, digging something up. You walk over and see it. A little cloth pouch buried beneath a flat stone. "What's this?" you ask. She shrugs. "Old Nan said it keeps the bad dreams out." You pick it up. It smells like rosemary and something bitter. Inside is a scrap of bone and a twist of thread. You want to scold her, but you don't because deep down you get it. Faith is complicated. Sometimes it's bread and wine and candles. Sometimes it's pouches of herbs and whispered hopes. Here's your quirky village belief for today. If you bury a silver coin under the chapel's threshold and walk backward out of Mass, your sins won't follow you home. You've seen 3 people do it this year alone. One of them was the reeve. He tripped. Back at home, your wife is boiling the soup. The smell is sharp with onion and old garlic. You settle into your spot near the hearth. The children curl around the fire like sleepy dogs. The baby is snoring in a pile of rags. The wife hums an old hymn as she stirs. There's an open scholarly debate about how sincere medieval peasants were in their Christian observance. Some argue it was rote, fear-driven obedience without much spiritual thought. Others believe it was deeply felt, genuine, and vital to emotional survival. You think it's both. You believe because you need to and because the world is terrifying without something to cling to. Night falls. The chapel bell rings again. Your wife crosses herself. You do too, just in case. A wind rattles the shutter. Somewhere outside, a dog howls. Your daughter murmurs a prayer under her breath, but not to any saint you recognize. You let go. Faith comes in many shapes. Tonight, it looks like soup, shared silence, and a bone charm in a child's hand. You should have known the day would go sideways when the chicken wouldn't leave the cottage. Normally, she waits by the door, pecks at the threshold a few times, and waddles off to do whatever it is chickens do when no one's watching. But today she's pacing like a nervous noblewoman, fluffing her feathers and making anxious clucks as if trying to warn you. Don't do it. Stay home. The world's not right today. You ignore her because today is market day. You don't get to town often. It's too far, too dangerous, and too exhausting to make the trip for anything less than urgent need. But today you've got eggs to trade, a few bundles of dried herbs your wife painstakingly tied last summer, and a cracked pot you're hoping the tinker might take pity on. Plus, your eldest has been needing new shoes since the last pair gave up and became foot-shaped flaps of sadness. So, you pull on your cloak, throw a satchel over your shoulder, and begin the long, muddy trudge toward town. The road is worse than usual. You step around puddles so deep they probably have fish, and you pass two carts already stuck axle-deep in the mud. The second cart's owner is trying to coax his mule forward with threats, prayers, and something that might have once been a love song. You keep walking. Your daughter walks beside you, trying not to complain, but doing a poor job of hiding the fact that her right foot is soaked and the left one has a stone in the shoe. You don't blame her. You've had a rock in your shoe since Pentecost, and you're just pretending it's a bone spur. The town appears on the horizon around midday. A squat sprawl of timber and smoke ringed with half-finished fences and the persistent smell of tannery runoff. There's always a part of you that gets tense as you approach it. Not fear exactly, more like the awareness that you don't quite belong. You're not poor enough to beg, not rich enough to shop, just one more muddy soul with too much to carry and too little to offer. At the gates, a man with no front teeth demands a penny for entry. You tell him you don't have one, and he narrows his eyes. Then what have you got? You show him the eggs. He nods. Half a dozen will do. It's extortion. Everyone knows it, but arguing will get you kicked in the ribs. You hand over the eggs and say nothing. He waves you through with the same hand he used to scratch his armpit. Welcome to town. The market square is already busy, full of shouting, music, barking dogs, and the occasional argument escalating toward violence. Stalls line the muddy lanes. Baskets of shriveled apples, bolts of rough wool, smoked fish strung on wire, pots and pans, iron nails, leather straps, and if you're lucky, actual food. Somewhere nearby, a man is singing about Street Christopher while juggling cabbages. A child darts past you with a fistful of stolen pears. You keep one hand on your satchel. Here's your historical fact of the day. Medieval market days were chaotic, essential, and often dangerous. They weren't just for buying and selling. They were your only shot at acquiring what you couldn't make, grow, or steal yourself. But they were also full of pickpockets, fraudsters, overcharging tradesmen, and the occasional outbreak of disease. If you left with what you came for and all your fingers, it was considered a success. You find a tinker stall and show him your pot. He holds it up like it's offensive, sniffs it, and says, "I'll give you a nail." You stare at him. A nail? A long one he offers. You accept because arguing might get you nothing. You pocket the nail and move on, stomach already growling at itself. You find a woman selling thick, chewy oatcakes and offer her some of your herbs. She sniffs them like a suspicious cat, then shrugs and gives you 2 cakes. You split one with your daughter and save the other for later. She asks if you can afford shoes. You don't answer. You wander the market, mentally cataloging everything you can't have. Salt too dear. Honey, forget it. Boots only if you sell your last chicken. You start to get that feeling again, like you're an ant staring up at a boot, waiting for it to drop. Suddenly, your daughter stiffens beside you. Duh, she says quietly. That boy just took something. You turn and see it. Quick fingers darting into someone's satchel. A boy, maybe 10, running like the wind. The stall owner gives chase, screaming about thievery and divine punishment. The boy vanishes into the crowd. The stall owner punches the air and turns back to his table where your daughter is now staring at the shoes. "They're nice," she whispers. You nod. "Too nice." She doesn't ask for them. She's smart. She knows better than to hope out loud. Here's your quirky fringe fact. Some folks believe market stalls are watched by invisible saints who record every dishonest deal and trip the guilty into puddles on their way home. That doesn't stop anyone from lying, of course, but it does explain why that pig seller last summer ended up with a face full of mud after selling a purebred pig that turned out to be half dog. By late afternoon, you've made your rounds. You've got 3 oat cakes, a new flint, a second-hand scarf that might be clean, and the beginnings of a blister on your heel. Your daughter's been quiet for a while. She doesn't complain, but you can see it in her eyes. Her feet hurt, her belly's empty, and she wanted shoes. As you head back toward the gate, you pass a beggar crouched in the mud. His face is covered in sores, and his voice is little more than a croak. "Coin for the poor," he whispers. You have nothing. You want to look away, but your daughter pulls a half-eaten oat cake from the satchel and hands it to him. Just like that. He smiles. His teeth are gone, but he smiles, and that somehow makes the world feel slightly less awful. You leave the town behind. The mud is thicker now, the wind colder. You walk in silence for a while until your daughter says, "Maybe I can just wrap the scarf around my feet." You nod. "We'll make it work." There's an open scholarly debate about whether market days lifted peasant spirits or crushed them further. Some say the excitement and variety brought a glimpse of the wider world. Others argue they only highlighted what peasants didn't have. You think both are true. You're glad you went, and you wish you hadn't. Back in the village, the sun is setting. Smoke curls from rooftops. The chicken is waiting at the door, looking smug. You open it. She strolls inside like a queen. You settle near the fire, sore and tired. Your wife takes one look at your haul and sighs. "It was that kind of day," you say. She nods. No scolding, no sarcasm, just a long, tired sigh. And for a moment, the warmth of home, rats and all, is enough. You've been told your entire life that it's dangerous to leave the village. And by told, we mean warned, scolded, whispered at, and once literally yanked backward by your collar when you got too close to the forest edge as a boy. And now here you are, boots laced tight, satchel full of turnips and nerves, staring down the rutted road that leads away from everything familiar. Because today, whether you like it or not, you're going out there. The manor steward has decreed it's time to inspect the western border, which is just fancy talk for dragging a few unlucky peasants out to walk the edge of the property to make sure no one stolen wood, squatted in a hut, or built an unlicensed pigsty. It's called a perambulation. This happens once every few years. Normally you'd fake a limp or blame a nosebleed, but this year the reeve put your name down, and that's that. You're joined by Alric, Wolf, the Thatcher, and 2 of the manor guards, neither of whom look thrilled to be escorting mud-covered laborers into the unknown. One has a crossbow, the other has the look of a man who keeps his breakfast in a flask. You don't ask questions. You step past the last stone marker at the village's edge, the one that looks like a hunched old man trying to stand, and the road quickly turns wilder, narrower, swallowed by brambles and tree roots. It doesn't take long before the comforting sounds of home, laughter, goats, the squawk of your judgmental chicken, fade into nothing but wind and birdsong. At first, it's almost beautiful. Sunlight streaming through the trees, ferns uncurling like lazy cats. The air smells like moss and wet bark. It's quiet in a way you rarely get to hear. And then the fear sets in. Here's your historical fact of the day. Most medieval peasants rarely left their villages. And when they did, they stuck to roads, well-trodden paths, and daylight hours. Because the woods, the moors, the empty spaces between towns, those weren't just unknown. They were full of very real dangers. Wild animals, thieves, angry nobles with territorial swords. And according to everyone's grandmother, goblins with excellent aim. You glance sideways at Alric, who's chewing on something that might be dried meat or might be bark. "You ever been this far?" You ask. He shakes his head. "No, heard about it though. So there's a pond that swallows sound." You blink. That's specific. He shrugs. Don't step in it. The guards lead the way, occasionally hacking through overgrown brambles or stopping to readjust a boot. You follow, heart doing its best to exit through your ribs. Every snapped twig sounds like a bandit. Every rustle of leaves makes you picture wolves with very refined palates. But the real danger comes about an hour in when the path narrows and the world goes quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, just you, Alric Wolf, and the two guards suddenly looking very alert. There, one whispers, pointing toward a stand of trees. You all freeze. A figure's moving slow, limping, hunched. For a moment, your brain decides it's a ghost. Possibly a monk ghost or a cursed reeve. Then the shape steps into view. A man, ragged and thin, with wild eyes and a rusty blade hanging from his belt. Bandit. The word hits your brain like a dropped stone. He sees you. You see him. The guards step forward. One raises his crossbow. The bandit hesitates, then bolts. Everyone relaxes. Lucky, one of the guards mutters. Could have been a mess. You don't disagree. Here's a fringe fact you've always heard, but never wanted to test. Some bandits don't kill you. They just strip you naked and leave you tied to a tree. You'd rather not confirm that firsthand. The rest of the walk is tense. You hear things you can't see. You step over old roots and wonder if someone buried something beneath them, something human. You spot bones near a tree stump and deliberately don't ask what kind. You reach the far boundary, a crooked stone etched with some symbol that probably meant something important 300 years ago, and scratch your name into the nearby post with a bit of charcoal as the custom, proof that you were here, that someone walked this path and lived to tell about it. The guards nod. Mission complete. Now comes the long walk back. And here's where your body starts to complain. Your legs ache. Your feet squish with every step. And you're fairly sure your left sock is 80% bog water. The woods no longer feel mysterious. They feel like they're waiting to eat you. You pass that same pond Alric mentioned. It's still too still. You make a wide arc around it and don't ask questions. Back in the village, the sun is low. Smoke curls from chimneys. Someone is burning turnip skins again, and it smells like regret. Your wife greets you at the door with a look that says, "Are you injured?" Followed by, "Did you bring anything useful?" You answer both questions with a head shake and a shrug. Your daughter tugs at your tunic. "Did you see a fairy?" "No," you say, "just Alric stepping in something that bit him." She gasps. "Was it enchanted?" "Possibly," you reply. There's an open scholarly debate about how dangerous the open countryside truly was for medieval peasants. Some records suggest rampant violence. Others insist it was mostly just fear layered with folklore. You think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's not the wolves that scare you most. It's the unknown. Because out there, no one knows your name. No one helps when you fall. There are no bells to guide you home. As you sit by the fire that night, legs throbbing, you stare into the flames and wonder what lies past the next ridge, past the next forest. You want to believe there's something more. That the world isn't just mud, taxes, and the reeves' voice echoing in your nightmares. But for now, you're grateful for rats in the walls and bread that doesn't bite back. You're home. You're sitting in the barley field, plucking weeds one by one when the messenger arrives on horseback, of course, because doom always comes on four legs. He's not one of yours. His cloak is too clean, his boots too polished, and his face too smug for someone delivering bad news. He doesn't ride fast either. He trots like someone who wants to be noticed. You already know what he's going to say before he says it. Everyone does. The rumors have been swirling for weeks like smoke through the rafters. Lords feuding, borders shifting. Someone insulted someone else's cousin. There's always a cousin. And now it's come to this. War. The messenger reins in at the manor gate. And within moments, the bells start ringing. Not the church bells, the other bells, the ones used for warnings, for proclamations, and once memorably to chase off a runaway pig. You sigh and stand, brushing dirt off your knees. Alric's already limping toward the green, followed by half the village. Everyone's doing that anxious shuffle, equal parts curiosity and dread. You follow, because if something dreadful is about to happen, you'd rather see it coming. The steward stands by the old cart, holding a scroll like it's made of fire. His expression is solemn, though you catch the edge of a smirk. He likes being important. By order of his lordship, Baron Geoffrey of Lee, he reads, voice puffed up with theatrical importance. All able-bodied men over the age of 16 are hereby called to serve in the defense of the barony against foreign and traitorous aggression. You glance at Auric. He's mouthing traitorous aggression like it's a bad turnip he can't swallow. The steward continues, those selected shall report for muster at dawn in 3 days' time. Each man is to bring such gear as he possesses. Arms will be provided to those without. You look down at your weeding stick and think, well, that's a start. The crowd mutters, shifting nervously. Some boys look excited. Finally, something more than digging in goats. But most of you know better. War doesn't care how muddy your boots are. It'll eat you just the same. After the reading, the steward pulls a list from inside his coat. These are the names summoned. He begins to read. Each name is like a small punch. Wulfstan, Beric, Oswin, Auric, you. Your stomach drops. You don't hear the names after yours. You're too busy staring at the dirt and try not to throw up into your boots. Here's your historical fact to chew on between waves of panic. Medieval levies were common across feudal Europe, where lords could call upon their peasants to serve in local militias or armies. You didn't get a choice. You didn't get paid unless you looted something. You didn't get armor unless someone died at first. What you did get was a chance to die for someone else's land. Back at home, your wife is silent as you explain. Not angry, not scared, just quiet in that way that means she's already doing the math. How many hands will be left? How much barley still needs turning? Whether the children can haul water alone. Do they say how long? She asks. You shake your head. She nods once, then pulls a pot off the fire and starts slicing turnips. Practical as ever. You're not the only one called that evening. Half the men gather around Eric's hearth with dull ale and duller faces. You're trying to convince yourselves it won't be that bad, that it's just a skirmish, that the Lord's cousin will blink first, that the enemy will get lost in the forest and eat the wrong mushrooms. But you all know better. Wulfstan, who served once 10 years ago, says it's mostly marching and shouting unless someone panics. And if they panic, you ask, then you get arrows. You sip your ale and imagine your children without you. Your wife trying to haul wood with a baby on her hip. Your daughter stepping into roles too heavy for her shoulders. You know, war rarely comes to villages like yours. Unless the armies lose, then it swallows villages like yours. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the day. Some villagers believe wearing your shirt inside out confuses enemy arrows because they can't strike a soul they can't recognize. Others carry bits of bone from saints' shrines or bury their swords under a tree the night before battle to scare off cowardice. You don't have a sword, just your weeding stick. But maybe you'll still tear your shirt. The night before departure, you can't sleep. The baby stirs. Your wife lies with her back to you, silent. You watch the fire shrink and flicker and try to memorize the shape of your home just in case dawn comes too fast. You dress slowly. Your daughter helps lace your boots. Your son watches, frowning. He doesn't understand yet, but he will. At the green, the reeve hands out gear like it's stale bread. You get a dented helmet, a leather strap that might once have been armor, and a spearhead tied to a stick. It's better than nothing, just barely. The others gather in clusters, joking loudly, trying to hide the fear. Auric shows off a lucky coin. Wolf stands sharpening a knife that looks more ceremonial than practical. The steward gives a speech about duty, loyalty, and glory, but no one listens. You're too busy saying goodbye with your eyes. There's an open scholarly debate about how much enthusiasm medieval peasants had for going to war. Some say it was an escape, an adventure, a chance to rise in status. Others argue it was fear, coercion, and hopelessness disguised as loyalty. You feel none of the former, only the dread of leaving what little control you had. You look back one last time. Your wife is standing at the cottage door holding the baby. Her face is unreadable. You raise your hand and she nods once. Then you turn and walk, and the village falls behind you like a dream you're not sure you'll wake from. You've been walking for days, and by now, the blisters on your feet have graduated from painful to sentient. The spear slung across your back feels heavier with every mile. Even though it's barely sharper than a turnip, the sun rises, burns, and falls again. Your world has become dirt and dust and the smell of sweat. Your own and everyone else's. They said you'd be marching toward the border, but marching is a generous word. It's more like limping with structure. The Lord's men push you all forward at a punishing pace, claiming there's no time to waste. No one says exactly why, but you hear whispers about towns burning, villages razed, fields soaked in more than rain. You don't know where you're going. No one really does. You just follow the boots in front of you and hope your legs hold up one more hour. Alric walks beside you, jaw clenched, face red and raw from wind. Wolf has a cough that's getting worse. Every night, he hacks into his blanket until someone tells him to shut up or die quieter. He flips them off, then keeps coughing. One morning, you arrive at a camp. Not yours, not anyone's anymore. It's burnt. What's left of the village is blackened timber, scorched thatch, and a smell that turns your stomach instantly. You see a chicken coop still smoldering. A wooden doll lying half covered in ash. You stop breathing for a moment because that doll looks exactly like the one your daughter carved last year. You remember it clearly. Scratched eyes, crooked smile, one leg shorter than the other. You shake it off. This isn't your village. This is someone else's nightmare. But that's the part that gets you. It could be anyone's village, and it might be yours next. Here's your historical fact. When war came through medieval countryside, peasants bore the brunt. Armies, friendly or not, lived off the land. That meant requisitioning livestock, burning fields to prevent the enemy from feeding themselves, and sometimes leveling whole settlements to send a message. The term collateral damage hadn't been invented yet, but you've just stepped in it. The soldiers with you don't flinch. They've seen this before, maybe done it before. One of them makes a crude joke about roasted goat and gets shoved by another. The mood turns darker after that. You're ordered to pitch camp nearby, as if the smoke and ashes might offer warmth. You lay your blanket down near a charred fence post and pretend it's a headboard. Alric curls beside you, mumbling something about his wife. You close your eyes and pretend the stars are candlelight back home. The next day, it rains hard. The road becomes soup. Your boots fill with water. Your blanket becomes a sponge. Every muscle in your body whines like a kicked dog, and your stomach has learned to stop expecting kindness. The bread they gave you 2 days ago is now moldy and damp. You eat it anyway. You stop at another village by late afternoon. This one still has people in it, barely. A few elders, a priest, a boy with a limp and haunted eyes. The rest are gone. Taken, fled, no one knows. You're ordered to gather food. You knock on a door and ask politely. A woman gives you a handful of wilted onions and a jar of what smells like pickled regret. You thank her anyway. Your quirky fringe fact for today. Some villagers believe that feeding soldiers spare their homes, but only if they also hung rosemary on the door and buried a coin at the gate. You notice several huts with rosemary wreaths and disturbed soil near the thresholds. They're trying everything, and who could blame them? That night, you sit with Alric under a canopy of wet branches, sharing the onions. Neither of you says much. You've learned that words just make the hunger worse. Around the fire, Wolf's stand is pale and shaking. He's burning up. Fever's got him. The reeve won't let him drop out. Says if he can't walk, he can crawl. You want to punch the reeve in the throat. You settle for glaring. In the morning, Wolf stand doesn't get up. No one has time to bury him properly. You dig a shallow trench beside the road and mark it with a broken stick. You say a short prayer. Maybe Street Cuthbert hears it. Maybe not. You march on. That's how this begins to feel. Not like a war, but like a slow-motion disaster. Men dropping, food dwindling, fear spreading like rot in a sack of apples. Every village you pass is more empty than the last. People either fled or vanished. You see smoke in the distance. Once you hear screaming, you don't investigate. Here's an open scholarly debate for you. Were peasant soldiers brave or just trapped? Some historians say conscripts went willingly, hoping for plunder or honor. Others argue they had no choice and no options. You don't know what you are, but you do know that if someone offered you a way home right now, you'd take it without blinking. Eventually, you reach the front line, or something like it. A muddy ridge overlooking a burned field. Across it, in the distance, another army moves. You can't see their faces, just the glint of armor, the blur of banners, the black outline of siege engines crawling like insects. Someone hands you a helmet that doesn't fit and tells you to wait. You wait and wait and wait. Your legs ache. Your jaw is locked. Your eyes are dry. Then, without warning, horns, not yours, theirs, a sound like thunder. Dozens of horses pounding toward your line. The man next to you throws up. Another drops his spear and runs. An arrow whistles past your head and buries itself in a tree behind you. You barely register it. Everything becomes chaos. Men shouting, weapons clashing, mud flying. You raise your makeshift spear just in time to deflect someone charging at you with a sword. You don't know who they are. You don't know if they're dead afterward. You don't know if you're the one who killed them. It's a blur of screaming and blood and hoofbeats, and then it's over. Somehow your side wins. They say. The enemy retreats. You're told it was a minor victory. You look around at the dead, at the wounded, at the scorched ground, and think, this is minor. You find Auric. He's alive. Cut across the arm, muddy from head to toe, but alive. You sit in the dirt beside him. You don't speak. You just breathe. You survived. But for what? You return home through smoke and silence. There's no cheering, no parade, no grand homecoming. Just a slow procession of half-dead men limping into familiar mud. Your boots are ruined, your cloak torn, and your left hand hasn't stopped shaking since the last time you tried to light a fire with it. You tell yourself it'll stop eventually. Auric's with you, though neither of you says much. You both run out of words. Or maybe you've just run out of the kind of thoughts that form into words. You pass the old millstone where kids used to climb and shout nonsense at each other. Now it's chipped and quiet, the moss darker than you remember. As you approach the village green, a few heads pop out of doorways. One or two women step forward. No wailing, no tears, just nods. That's how it is here. Emotion is a luxury, like butter or sleep. Your wife is waiting at the door, arms crossed, the baby on her hip. She stares at you like she's counting fingers and toes and hoping they all still add up. She doesn't run to you. She doesn't cry. She just says, "You're late." You step inside and feel something loosen in your chest. The familiar creak of the door. The smell of ash and cabbage. The way the youngest throws his arms around your leg and nearly knocks you over. You laugh, and it comes out like a cough. You sit by the fire while your wife brings water and bread. You don't ask where the bread came from. You just eat it slowly like it might vanish. That night you don't sleep. The cottage is quiet, but your head isn't. You see faces, some you knew, some you didn't. You hear the crack of bone, the squelch of mud, the scream of horses, and somewhere in it all, the sound of your own voice shouting something you don't remember meaning. And then come the dreams. The worst ones aren't about death. They're about almost dying. The kind where you swing too slow, trip over someone else's corpse, feel the blade at your neck, and wake up just before it lands. You sit up in a straw, sweating, heart galloping, your wife snoring softly beside you. You wonder if it ever goes away. Here's your historical fact, grim as it may be. After the Black Death swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, the survivors returned to a changed world and a changed mindset. Entire villages were wiped out. Labor shortages shifted power. But before that came the quiet devastation, the stunned silence, the wondering why me? Because yes, the Black Death has come. The first signs were just whispers. A traveler in the next town falling ill. A merchant bleeding from his gums. A priest who coughed blood on the altar and never stood up again. You heard the stories and didn't believe them. You wanted not to. Plague is a thing from old stories. God's wrath. The punishment of cities. Not something that strolls into your little huddle of thatch roofs and barley fields. But then it does. The first death in your village comes within a week. A boy, 8 or 9, healthy one day, fever the next, gone by sundown. His mother wails so loud the crows take flight from the trees. Then it spreads fast, faster than fire, faster than famine. One by one, people fall. They get the swellings under arms, behind knees, in the groin. Hard lumps that grow black and stink like rotting meat. The fever comes next, then madness, then silence. You try to help. You do. You bring broth to Maud the baker, only to find her slumped over her oven. You tend Auric's fever with rags and prayer until he stops recognizing your face. Your wife pulls the children close. She boils everything, water, cloth, even the air if she could. She tells them not to touch anything, not to breathe too deep, not to go near anyone. The church bells ring constantly now. Not for mass, for death. Here's your quirky fringe fact if you need something to lighten the horror. Some villagers believe tying a toad to your stomach would draw out the plague. Others wore garlic around their necks, stuffed herbs into their noses, or carved crosses on their doors to warn the sickness away. You try the garlic. You smell terrible, but you're still breathing. Maybe it helps. Father Godric says the plague is divine punishment. For what exactly? He's less clear. Pride, sloth, failure to tithe, take your pick. He keeps preaching even when his voice starts to tremble. He dies mid-sermon, collapses behind the altar, eyes wide and wet. No one finishes his sentence. The days blend into each other, each one more hollow than the last. The village feels emptied even when people are still moving, like the soul has been bled out, leaving only bodies in motion. There's an open scholarly debate about how many people the plague really killed. Some say a third of Europe, some say more. You stop counting after the 15th body. Your own family huddles in the cottage. You barely go out. You grow thinner. The children stop playing. Your wife stops singing. The baby cries until he doesn't. And yet you survive. Somehow you and your wife and the 3 older children make it through the worst of it. Maybe it was luck. Maybe garlic. Maybe the toad. You bury too many people to celebrate. But when the wind shifts and the air begins to smell more like earth and death, you feel something you'd almost forgotten. Relief. It takes weeks before you start leaving the cottage again. The green is overgrown. Chickens wander aimlessly. Half the cottages are empty. The others house people who look like ghosts wearing muddy boots. Auric's house is abandoned. So is Wolf's stands. You check anyway just to be sure. And then one day you wake to silence. Real silence. No coughing, no wailing, no bells, just the rustle of wind in the thatch and the creak of your bones as you stand. The plague is past. It didn't knock. It didn't say goodbye. It just left like a thief who'd taken more than his share. You're still here. The world is quieter now, scarred, strange, and quieter. And for the first time in what feels like forever, the birds are singing. You don't even notice spring arriving this year. It's not like someone sounds a trumpet and declares the flowers open for business. It just sneaks up one morning. Soft mist rising from the fields, green tips pushing through frostbitten soil, and the distinct sound of bees getting back to their noisy nonsense. You step outside, blinking against the pale light, and realize the air doesn't bite your skin anymore. It feels like waking up after a long illness you didn't know you had. The village is still thin, both in people and in spirit. Too many doors hang open, never shut again. Some cottages have collapsed from neglect. Others are being quietly cleaned, patched, and re-inhabited by those left behind. Like the world hit pause, and now everyone's just trying to remember how to press play. You find yourself doing more than usual, hauling timber for Maud, who's back at her oven, helping old Nan, who somehow survived everything and now insists she saw death personally leave the village, wearing boots and muttering about bad turnips. You believe her. You believe anything right now. You fix the fence around your plot, though half the vegetables have bolted or rotted. Your wife plants anyway. She sings as she works. A quiet hum more than a tune. But it's the first melody you've heard in months. The baby toddles after her, try to eat rocks. The other children help without being asked, not because they've grown more obedient, but because they get it now. Life's fragile. Food even more so. You sit under the ash tree near the green one afternoon and just breathe. You watch the smoke rise from the few chimneys still standing and think, we're still here. Somehow, like dandelions in a boot print. Here's your historical fact for today. After the Black Death, surviving peasants often found themselves in new positions of power. With so many dead, labor became scarce. Lords couldn't till the land alone. Wages went up, demands got louder. Some peasants even left their manors and walked off to greener pastures despite the law saying they couldn't. And in the years that followed, more than one rebellion was lit by that spark. You hear whispers in your own village. They need us now. We should ask for more grain. What if we didn't owe the same rent anymore? Nothing loud. Not yet. But the seed is there. Even the steward looks nervous these days. He doesn't strut quite so confidently. The reeve keeps his stick lowered. You catch him eyeing the vacant plots like he's not sure how long his power holds when no one's left to fear it. The Lord doesn't appear. No proclamations, no messengers. The manor is quiet. His tall windows shuttered. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he fled. Maybe he's waiting to see who's left before bothering with rules again. You don't care. Your concerns are simpler. The roof still leaks. The barley's coming in crooked. The pigs are refusing to breed. And the baby's teething in a way that suggests vengeance for crimes you didn't commit. Still, it's spring. Your wife makes soup out of actual fresh greens. For the first time in what feels like a century, dandelion leaves, chickweed, some sort of wild garlic. You don't care what it is. You slurp it down and feel it stir something deep in your chest. Hope or heartburn. Either way, it's warm. That night, you and your wife sit outside the cottage, watching the stars blink back into their usual positions, like actors returning after an intermission. She leans her head on your shoulder. The baby is finally asleep. The other kids are chasing fireflies near the stream, giggling and whispering so they don't wake the goats. You point to one bright star and ask, "Do you think the saints live up there?" Your wife hums, "Maybe." Or maybe they're just watching to see if we mess it up again. You chuckle. Fair. Here's your quirky fringe fact for the night. Some villagers believe that when a soul survives the plague, it becomes harder to kill by anything else. There's even a word for it, bone blessed. The bone blessed can eat spoiled meat without dying, never drown, and outwit foxes. You're not sure if it's true, but you feel different, like something in you burned out and hardened. One morning, a boy arrives from the next village, dirty and wide-eyed. Says the field master there died, and no one knows how to irrigate the north plot. You offer to help. You walk the hour's journey with a few tools and a sack of turnips. On the way, he asks you questions about how to judge soil, how to spot early blight, how to make nettle tea for fertilizer. You answer without thinking, like your father once answered you. And that's when it hits you. You become the elder. Not by age, but by attrition, by grit. You didn't ask for it. You certainly didn't study for it. But here you are. Back in your village, people start asking you things. Little things at first. Do you think it'll rain? Should I dig the trench deeper? Does this cheese smell wrong to you? Then bigger questions. Should we let the new family settle near the south end? If the steward raises the rent again, will you speak for us? You try not to answer too quickly because power, like fire, gives warmth until it doesn't. There's an open scholarly debate about whether the post-plague era was the beginning of peasant empowerment or just a brief moment of illusion before the old chains were tightened again. Some point to the revolts that followed, the birth of wage labor, the erosion of feudal norms. Others say it didn't last, that the lords adapted, laws changed, and the poor stayed poor. You don't know what will happen next. You only know that today your children have bread, your wife has laughter, and your neighbors are looking to you like maybe, just maybe, you're someone worth following. And that's a heavy feeling. That night, your daughter places a tiny bouquet of violets on the windowsill. She says it's to thank the spirits for not taking you. You don't tell her how close they came. You just kiss the top of her head and whisper, "Thanks, spirits." You lie in bed beside your wife and feel the warmth of her back against yours. Outside, the stars shine. The fire crackles, and for once your dreams are quiet. The year has turned again, and you feel it not by the calendar because you've never seen one, but in your bones. In the way the mornings have shifted, how the light lingers a little longer in the evening, and the air smells of wet soil and new life. Lambs are wobbling in the fields. The bees are back to being annoying, and your hands are already blistered from the plow before you've even finished breakfast. Life has resumed, but it isn't the same. You're older now, not in years necessarily, but in a deeper way. You walk like someone who has seen fire take houses, rats steal food, and plague take friends. You laugh less quickly. You work with more precision. You notice the small things now. A beetle on the gatepost, the exact moment your daughter's voice begins to sound like a woman's. The village is half its size and twice as close. People talk more, not because they're chattier, but because silence started to feel dangerous. The pain of the last year has become something like a scar on everyone. Visible, accepted, and slowly fading into the texture of everyday life. You still say the names of the dead aloud sometimes when you're alone. It's like sweeping dust off a shelf. Quiet, necessary, and only noticed if you stop doing it. One afternoon, while you're mending the fence near the west pasture, a rider appears. Another messenger. This one is younger, less polished, his tunic torn at the elbow. He has no scroll, just news. The Lord is dead. You wait for more. Some decree, some threat, some replacement, but none comes. Just the facts. Fever took him. The manor is sealed. No heir is claiming the land. The steward hasn't been paid in weeks. And as of this morning, the laborers have walked off the estate entirely. You return to the village and tell the others. The reaction is odd. Not shocked, not excited, just quiet. A few nods. One old man mutters, "Well, that's that." You all stand there for a few moments, processing the strange idea of nobody owning you anymore. And then you get back to work. Here's a historical fact. In the years following the Black Death, many manorial systems broke down or were forced to adapt. Lords died, heirs couldn't enforce control, and peasants, once tied to the land, began to move, bargain, and assert themselves in ways that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. The feudal contract had been frayed. In some places, it snapped entirely. In your village, there are meetings now, real ones around fires with bread passed and words weighed carefully. You and 3 others are asked to speak for the rest, to handle disputes, to set boundaries, to write, yes, actually write, a message to the nearest scribe requesting a record of who lives here now. We'll be a free village. Auric says one night, voice hushed with awe. No lord, you nod. Until someone decides they want us again. He shrugs. Then we'll be ready. You want to believe that. You almost do. You spend the next weeks helping to mark new fields. Without the steward, land boundaries shift. Some people move into old cottages. Others join up with distant family who've wandered in from elsewhere. You're one of the ones people look to, which is terrifying. Every time someone says, ask him, you want to duck behind a hay cart, but you don't because you're one of the elders now, whether you ask for it or not. Your daughter starts spending more time with the Thatcher's boy. You notice it before she says anything. How she brushes her hair without being told. How she hums more than usual. You pretend not to notice, but you also keep your eye on him. The children are growing taller, stronger. They're working alongside you now, not playing at farming, but doing it. Your eldest builds a new chicken coop without you even asking. You want to hug him. Instead, you slap his back and say, solid work. He beams. You suspect he'll build a house of his own soon. Here's your quirky fringe belief for today. Some villagers say when a place survives pestilence and fire and war, it becomes blessed dirt. They'll plant beans from the same field every year and swear they taste sweeter. Others bury a feather or a coin in the garden as thanks to the unseen. You don't know if it's true, but you've started talking to the soil as you plant just in case. There's an open scholarly debate about whether rural communities like yours became proto-democratic in the aftermath of the plague. Some scholars think these informal councils were the birth of something new, small experiments in self-governance. Others say they were just temporary patches until the next lord came stomping in with soldiers and scrolls. You think both can be true. This freedom is real, but so is the risk. You take precautions, build hidden stores of grain, teach the children to track who comes and goes, set watchers on the edge of the woods, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You've learned that survival isn't just about labor. It's about knowing when to duck. One morning, your wife brings you a pot of stew and says, it's quiet today. You listen. No hammering, no squawking, no arguments over goats. Just the wind in the trees and the soft splash of someone washing clothes at the stream. You smile. It's the kind of quiet I can live with. She sits beside you, legs stretched out, head resting on your shoulder. Do you think the world's different now? You nod slowly. Not everywhere, but here maybe. In the distance, children laugh. A fire crackles. Someone sings a half-remembered tune from last harvest. And in that moment, you feel it. Something gentle and strange. Not joy, not relief, but something stronger. Continuance. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. But tonight you're warm. You're fed. Your home and the village, stitched together by memory and sweat and bone-deep stubbornness, lives on. So now you're lying there tucked under your blanket. Maybe the room's a little dim. Maybe the hum of a fan is keeping the world at bay. And you're wondering what just happened. You've wandered across muddy fields, scrubbed fleas off your legs, nearly been trampled by a warrior, and somehow survived a plague that didn't knock before entering. Congratulations. You made it to the other side of medieval peasant life. And somehow you're still in one piece. Well, sort of. Your boots are trashed, and your soul's a bit frayed at the edges. But hey, you're breathing. That's worth something. You've seen how much of life in that world was lived moment to moment. Just staying fed, staying warm, keeping the kids from catching something mysterious and fatal. But even in all that dirt and suffering and endless turnips, there was community. There were little triumphs. A surviving lamb, a repaired roof, a bowl of soup with actual flavor. And love, in its quiet, relentless way, showed up, too. In the way someone patched your sleeves without being asked or handed you their last bit of bread with a shrug and a smile that said, "Don't mention it." What's strange is that for all its mud and mortality, that life had meaning. Not Instagram meaning, not TED Talk meaning, but the kind that comes from being rooted to a place, tangled up in the fates of others, and waking up each morning determined to do what needs doing. Even if it's just chasing a chicken out of your bed again. So sleep now knowing you've been there right in the middle of the chaos, the quiet, the grit, and the slow resilience that held it all together. History doesn't just live in dusty books and castle ruins. Sometimes it lives in the calloused hands of someone who just dug up their last turnip and still found the strength to plant more. And if you hear scratching in your ceiling tonight, probably just a rat. Very medieval of you.